here as a wife and mother, not a servant. The booklet was published in 1931, so those are not pot lights. In fact, the lights from above seem more suggestive of some kind of epiphany or annunciation. There's an air of holiness in this picture, which does seem to resonate with some of the pious sentiments in the community cookbooks. This surely is the woman with the Martha hands and the Mary heart. In serving her family, she is communing with God. There's another category of women alone, less numerous than those in the kitchen, so I've chosen just a single example. This is the glamorous woman. She is sometimes seen out shopping, sometimes having brunch with similar-looking friends. She is invariably well-dressed, and she exudes, in the immortal words of Irving Berlin, an atmosphere that simply reeks with class. This example comes from the Canada Starch Company in 1927. The narrative takes a tricky turn here. It's possible that this woman in pearls and heels did spend the morning in the kitchen, but it's also possible that she had help. In some ways, it doesn't matter. Though I haven't talked about it, one of the other themes of the community cookbooks is the good cook's desire and ability to impress her friends, and that surely is the implicit narrative of this cover. If the kitchen-based images tell the potential buyer she is a good cook, this one takes a rather different tack. You are beautiful, the image says. Poised, well-dressed, relaxed, and you have friends. It's easy to see why this just might be a more appealing portrait than the one that tells its purchaser her place is in the kitchen. Sorry for the quality of some of these. They look darn clear at home on my desk. The next category of images I'd like to take a look at is those of women in context, above all, in the context of their families. Whenever a mother and daughter appear together on a cover, the situation is a variation on a single story. One of your jobs, and as we can see here by the smile, one of your joys as a mother is teaching your daughter to cook, to be like you. There are many things to like here, above all the echo between mother and daughter with the blouses and ties, their white aprons and short hair. But it's also reassuring to see that Dad is out where he belongs in the field growing crops, which you can't see, but trust me, he's out there. Interestingly, once a boy enters the scene, the narrative usually changes. Now the mother is not the teacher or the conveyor of tradition. She is, depending on your perspective, the nourishing and providing goddess or the family slave. This example from the Harris Abattoir Company appeared around 1920. This beleaguered mother hasn't even had time to change out her housecoat. For me, this is the face of the woman who wishes cookies and donuts grew on trees. As her daughter drags her to the baking table, and her helpful little son holds up a brick of domestic shortening to get her started. When she is not cooking, Mother is likely to be waiting on the rest of the family, now joined by Dad. I would guess this Shires booklet is from the late 30s or 40s. Dad is plainly a businessman, not a farmer. The narrative is made clear by a surprising detail. No place is set at the table for Mother. The fact that she stands while all the others sit to be waited on tells the whole story. I think because I am running a little late here, I'm going to move very quickly through several images, and I'll just let you take a real quick look at a few of these. Boys are always happy. They're almost always alone, and they are eating. I assume he made that sandwich himself. If the cheese is hanging out, the sandwich is not sliced, and there are no pickles on the plate. This comes from Ingersoll, by the way, the Ingersoll Cheese Company. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to show you that. This is from Cowan's Cocoa, around 1921. I included it partly as an echo, I hope, of what Dr. Mitchinson talked about. You probably can't read what it says below that beautiful image. It says, Cowan's Cocoa makes chubby children, which is not a bad thing in 1921. It means she's healthy and happy. You're a good mom. This is a fascinating one for me. When I started looking for boys and girls together, I was astonished by the degree to which, call me naive, but the degree to which boys are dominant in the pictures. This guy could be alone. He's like any of the other little boys we see eating on any of the other cookbooks of single boys. I don't think his mother poured that corn syrup on that bread. Once again, I think it's self-serve. But that's a good message for the mother too, right? It means that she's a good provider, she's bought the right stuff, the kid can look after himself, it's a nice compromise. But there's also the message that Crown Brand corn syrup is good for both kids. And then you say momentarily, both kids? Oh yes! Way back in the back, 1/5 his size, is a little girl. She is not eating. Does that mean she's really polite? Does it mean she knows better than to eat corn syrup poured on a piece of bread? Does it mean that later she's going to be cooking with her mother in the kitchen? I'm not sure. But the quality of boy and girl pictures together deserves a whole talk on its own. Favorite image I didn't bring is from a maple syrup company in Quebec. 2 little kids, girl and boy, standing out in the field, a forest surrounded by maple trees. The little boy is holding a little wooden spoon so his sister can lick the maple syrup off it. Maybe you have to see it. It's a very male-dominant image in a very strange way. Okay, coming to men. And finally, men. We've already seen a man sitting at table being served Schneider's meats by his wife. Men are certainly and understandably less frequent visitors to the covers of these cookbooks, but when they do appear, again the patterns emerge. Above all, men are workers. Their relationship to food provision and preparation is professional. They are paid for what they do. The most ubiquitous image is the chef or baker. This example comes from 1939, the Vancouver Sun cookbook. I love the many layered implications of this one. First, I'm reminded of that subversively gendered little recipe, how to cook a husband, or in this case, how to cook a chef. And then there's the possibility that it illustrates too many cooks are spoiling the broth. And finally, where do these chefs come from? Judging by that facial hair, I'd say they're French. They're like an alien species. They do not represent to the housewife what cooking is like. They're more like a collective stamp of approval. The recipes inside are so good that your food will taste like it was prepared by a French chef. The recipes inside include bacon delight, spaghetti chop suey, and muffins made with grape-nuts flakes. If the Vancouver Sun is anything to go by, French cooking may not be all it's cracked up to be. My favorite chef image comes again from Schneider's. These busy little guys make it seem as though Santa's elves had opened a restaurant for carnivores. In fact, if you look closely, they do have little pointy ears. But elvish or not, they are doing men's work. Years later, when barbecues come into fashion and North American men begin to participate in cooking, the obvious reasons are that it is done outdoors, not in the woman's world of the kitchen, and it involves fire. We know men like fires. But I suspect it's also because it's mostly about meat. Men don't do dainty in this world, but meat is another matter. And finally, there are a few images of men like grown-up boys being fed. We've already seen one. Here's another from the Campbell's Soup book. Here's a woman pleasing her hubby. She looks a bit glamorous, like the magic baking powder tea biscuit maker, but she's wearing her apron, so she combines the sophisticate with the housewife. The man is an office worker or maybe somebody's boss. He's rubbing his hands in anticipation of pleasure. Her smile is knowing. Is there subliminal sex in this image? Maybe I'm not a good judge. The text, just the thing for a hungry man, again plays on that old narrative of love and food. The woman addressed in the smaller print is advised to, quote, watch the foods men favor. Most of the text inside is just a description of the kinds of soups Campbell's makes. In fact, there are only 5 recipes in here, including a favorite of one of my aunties, tomato soup cake, a surefire winner with every real man. And finally, this comes from the Maple Leaf Milling Company around 1939. I have to say, it's an image that makes me, as a man, just a bit uncomfortable. That plumpness, that phony smile, above all, the conspiratorial wink. Again, the old refrain, the way to a man's heart. Inside the book, inside, the book says it's, quote, dedicated to wives whose husbands appreciate good food and to all women who like to please their men. It was this book I had in mind when I came up with my subtitle, Why Is This Man Smiling? He is smiling because he is catered to, cooked for, served at table, because his wife dedicates so much of her mind and creativity to pleasing him, because she is pure and wholesome and thinks only of others, especially him and their 2 lovely children, one of each sex. In the gendered world of cookbooks, the woman may at times say the kitchen is her throne, but there is really only one king here, and that wink tells us that he knows he's on to a good thing.
I want him at the back, thanks. No. I'm going to give you a different view of women over the same period, from about 1920 to 1980. And this is a negative picture of mothers. And it's all about mother blaming as the cause of obesity in Canada. Certainly Canadians in the early part of the 20th century were very concerned about the health of their children. And
they can't hear you at the back if you don't talk into the mic.
Okay. That's weird. Okay, Canadians were very concerned about the health of their children, and they were introducing a lot of studies into the educational system and in families, trying to find out what was causing the substandard health. And they came to the conclusion that basically many children in Canada were malnourished. And the key to malnourishment was that the children were underweight. So they were trying to find out how badly, a crisis that they were facing. And so they had all these studies about how mothers were feeding their families, and particularly their children and their teenagers, and they basically were saying that the mothers were doing a very poor job. Now, where this comes into obesity is because of these studies. They're looking for children who are malnourished and who are underweight, but at the same time that they're weighing all these children, they're finding there are some that are overweight and obese. And so they see these children and teenagers as malnourished as well. So the nutrition and obesity are going together in terms of these studies. The cause of obesity was seen as overeating. Nothing much has changed, and even in the present day. So who's responsible for this? Who controls the family food that is put on the table? And we've seen it's mother. And when she does a good job, she is praised. You might not like the role, but everyone else in the society seems to like the role. But the people that I'm looking at, the people, the experts who are talking about obesity, who are writing about obesity, who are studying obesity, they do not see women this way, certainly not mothers. They see mothers as failing their children. And to give you a couple of examples, they complained that children were eating too much candy. This was a constant refrain for the whole 60 years that I'm looking at. And it's mothers who are giving them the candy. Who else is going to give them the candy? There's just this assumption. Mothers also, they claim, are offering their children unhealthy and fattening meals. During the Depression, mothers on relief were criticized because they were using that relief money to buy too many carbohydrates or sugars instead of milk and vegetables. Teenagers were not drinking enough milk. Instead, they were drinking soda pop. And underlying the actions of the teenagers was, quote, inculcation of the habit by an overzealous or misguided mother, unquote. In 1966, Chatelaine had a Miss C diet book, and in its ad asked the question of the reader, quote, is your daughter overweight. The unsaid message being to the mother, how could you have let this happen? Adelaide Daniels, founder and leader of the Weight Watchers in Ontario, reinforced the criticism of mothers. The people she worked with in their efforts to lose weight told the same story, apparently. Quote, my mother forced me to clean my plate as a child. My mother gave me chocolate cookies when the boys bullied me. My mother this, my mother that. If that wasn't bad enough, there was the psychology dynamic of families that were leading to obesity. Mothers were often deemed as overprotective. At the same time, they were very ambitious for their fat children. They also tended to do everything for them. That is, they did not want their children to be independent, and the worst of it was that some mothers gave food to their children, too much food to their children, as a substitute for not loving them. So this is mother blaming, you know, writ large. But I'm standing in front of you, and I'm a feminist, so I always thought, well, I think there must be another perspective, you know. And so what I'm going to talk about for the rest of the time I have is that perspective. And I think there are aspects of mothers' lives at this time that help explain why she might not be doing what they are telling her to do.